Chapter 8, Cell Reproduction. Please have your outline out to follow along with the PowerPoints. And as a little bonus, you can answer all the questions in this PowerPoint and at the end of the PowerPoint and submit them. I'll give you extra credit for having the correct answers. All right, so you can submit the extra credit through Canvas or through email, but you're going to have to numbers 1 through 20 and have the correct answers, and I'll check them. All right, so let's start. So this is cell reproduction. So why do cells reproduce? They reproduce to replace themselves, right? Or to make the organism grow larger, or to mature, or to fix any defects or injury. So let's look at our functions of cell division by mitosis. Mitosis is known as asexual reproduction. So let's look at letter A under cell reproduction. Asexual means that you are creating a clone, right? You are cloning a cell, making an exact copy of the cell. So there's nothing changing. There's no genetic mixing of any, two cells. So that's asexual. Asexual reproduction means that you're creating a genetically identical clone. The opposite, or right, the other end of it is sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction is the mixing of genetic information. So you are recombining DNA in a way so that the offspring is genetically different than the parents. And most of the organisms you probably can think of reproduce sexually. All animals reproduce sexually. Many plants reproduce sexually. Fungi, everything that you can probably think of. But there are lots of examples of asexual reproduction in the world and also in your body, right? So if you were to, let's take a look at this dog who injured himself. If he needs to fix the bone that he broke, those cells of his bone are going to reproduce, and they're going to make clones of themselves and patch up the injury. If this kid is going to grow any taller, he needs to make more cells, so he is also going to have a lot of mitosis going on in his body to reproduce his cells. Remember that these cells don't have to be the exact same, but genetically they are identical. As you learned, your cells have a library of DNA and they can specialize to do different jobs, but they all have the same library. So when you copy that library, you're making a clone. If you look at reproduction, so some organisms will actually use this mitosis or asexual reproduction to literally reproduce their species. So an amoeba, for example, these single-celled organisms like an amoeba, if you make a copy of yourself and you split, then you just increased your population by 1, right? So some instances, but organisms can use mitosis as a form of reproduction. And we can see here this is regeneration. So if you are a multicellular organism, you can use mitosis for regeneration, and you can also see this in the plant kingdom where you can take a small clipping and generate a new plant by taking a clipping or a clone. So if we look at letter A, we talked about sexual reproduction. For unicellular organisms, number 1, it's basically for reproduction, and number 2, for multicellular organisms, for growth and differentiation, repair, and regeneration. The first part of this lecture deals with asexual reproduction or mitosis. The second part deals with the sexual reproduction or the meiosis. So this is an example of development. So we have day 1, a fertilized egg or a zygote, which is going to undergo lots of mitotic divisions to become a multicellular frog. All right, the concept check here. So you're going to take a look at this question and submit the answer for extra credit. I'm going to just go ahead and move on. Here is the chromosomes that you can see inside of a cell. So this is a plant cell, but you can clearly see the chromosomes. So we're going to talk about what chromosomes are made of, how they are organized in these next couple of slides. So under Roman numeral 2 for eukaryotic chromosomes, you can see that the DNA is actually quite long in each one of our cells, and so in order to pack this molecule up to fit snugly inside of our cells, it is highly organized in its packing. So let's take a look at what it's wrapped around. So these pink balls are called histone proteins, and the DNA, which is in blue, is going to be wound around 8 histone proteins, and these proteins are going to be clustered into little units. So there's a cluster of 8 with DNA wound around it. There's a little bit of a gap where you have just a strand of DNA, but leading to another cluster of histones and another cluster. So let's name these things. So the histone proteins and DNA, so this unit I'm circling right now, that's called a nucleosome. Okay, letter B, a nucleosome. So if you took a picture of this DNA chromatin, so chromatin is DNA that is not tightly packed yet, it's still a little loose, it would look like this picture here. So it would look like beads on a string. Each bead would be a nucleosome, and the string in between would just be that DNA leading to another nucleosome. Now, when DNA gets packed up, it forms a chromosome. So chromatin packs into a chromosome. Chromosome is supercoiled DNA. So look at what's going on here. These nucleosomes that have DNA wound around these proteins, they get wound up into a fiber, and this fiber gets supercoiled into a chromosome. And then this really, really tight packet of DNA and protein can be seen under a microscope when it's tightly packed into chromosomes. So let's take a look back at our picture here. So what you see here, these are chromosomes, right? These is very distinct units, which I think look like Cheetos, of DNA plus protein. Over here, we can see that we see a nucleus, but I don't see the chromosomes. I don't see these discrete Cheetos. I see dots. I don't know what they are, but I don't see actual units. So the DNA in a cell that's not dividing is in chromatin form. It's a loosely packed, kind of spaghetti-like form. Or maybe you can think of it as yarn, right? So if yarn is just loose and scattered about, that is chromatin. If you take the yarn and you wind it up into one of those bundles, that's the chromosome. All right, so let's keep going on and talk about some chromosomes. So this is the overall picture. The double helix, we have our nucleosomes, we have, this is basically our chromatin, and then once it's tightly packed and wound up, then it's chromosome. The number of chromosomes in different organisms vary. So this is random. It doesn't mean, your number of chromosomes doesn't make you bigger or better or smarter. It's just sort of random. You can see we have 46 chromosomes in each one of our cells. This red rat has 102. This deer has 6. So it's pretty random here. All right, here's the other concept check. I will leave this up to you to answer.